Hello, and welcome to the Nutrition and Life Podcast. This is where we look at various nutrition and fitness-related topics through the lens of application. We want to give you practical takeaways so that you can create your healthiest, best self backed by knowledge. Now, on to the episode with your host, Coach Lisa.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Nutrition and Life Podcast. My name is Lisa, I am your host, and in today's episode we're going to talk about lean gaining strategies. So strategies for maximizing muscle growth while keeping fat gain minimal. Usually that requires being in a small calorie surplus, so consuming slightly more calories than what your body is burning. Many people also try to grow muscle at maintenance, which works really, really well if you are rather new to lifting or if you're new to a high protein diet, and sometimes can even just be achieved through optimizing things through training. In fact, I personally have been recomping, so to speak, for the last couple of years, but recently I felt more hungry. I felt like I was actually getting to lean even though my calories hadn't changed. And after a few injuries, I also felt like I had lost some muscle. I had to reduce the volume in my lower body training. So I kind of wanted to see if I can grow my glutes in particular more. I want to minimize my hunger cues. I do feel because I have been growing more muscle over the last few years, my general calorie requirement has gone up. So even though my calorie intake hasn't changed, I do think that my calorie requirement or the amount of calories that my body is burning has changed. And therefore, I probably was either at the very low end of maintenance or even in a small calorie deficit. So I have decided to commit to a muscle growth phase. I have committed to at least 6 months, and I am about 8 weeks in now. So again, generally as newbies, we can actually also grow muscle in a calorie deficit if we're new to the training, if we're new to a higher protein diet, if we're simply new to the right calorie and macro distribution, fueling our body well, etc. This is usually reserved for people maybe in the first year or two of strength training and a higher protein diet. After that, we can still try to recomp, so build muscle and lose fat at maintenance. That usually works well for another couple of years or so. After that, as I said, a lot can be achieved simply through training, through paying more attention to what we're eating, meal timing, all these kind of things, fine-tuning supplements, etc. But as we get higher in training age, and I have been progressively strength training, or definitely strength training in a structured manner since 2014, so coming up 9 years. Therefore I'm definitely an experienced athlete, and I am assuming that my body does need a small surplus in order to build more muscle. So to achieve that, or why is that? How does that even make sense? Well, I always like to think of it as when we're building muscle, you can think of it as like building a house. If you have a shortage of supply and you're only just starting out, you're still going to be able to put something up, probably not getting the house finished or anything, but you can start with whatever you got at hand. But then as you get further into it, you need more supply. At some point, if supply meets demand, that's okay. But eventually, especially if the workers get more efficient and so on, you kind of need a surplus of whatever you have, or at least your building is going to progress better if you have more material, if you have a wider variety of material, and so on. And so that's how you can kind of think of the whole gaining process as well. Many people, when we think of gaining, muscle gaining, especially women, kind of, oh no, I don't want to gain any muscle. But in many cases, if we think of our idols or the people that we want to look like, they actually have a higher amount of muscle mass than we think potentially. I can't think of any specific examples in terms of famous people or anything like that that everybody might know. But generally speaking, even when women think of, oh, she has a beautifully defined body, particularly around the glutes, tight arms, tight abs, and so on. It might look like she only does cardio, but most likely she has built some muscle as well. So, we still, nonetheless, I definitely understand that people don't like the term gaining or just generally bulking. I personally actually really hate the term bulking. I think it sounds very masculine. And also it just sounds like excess. It sounds really, really like you definitely have to get fluffy when doing so, or you have to put on a ton of fat, which reality is you do need to, or you will be putting on a little bit of body fat as well. That is just part of a gaining phase. But my strategy is to keep that fat gain minimal, and I think most people are going to sustain a gaining phase for longer if they feel more comfortable in their body as well. We also need to consider our training age when it comes to how much we can actually gain per month. We can't just generally say, okay, in a lean gaining phase, everybody can put on 2 pounds per month. Of course, this depends highly on how tall you are, how much muscle mass you already have, again, your training age, and so on. So generally speaking, we can say that a novice could expect a 1 to 1.5% of their body weight increase in muscle mass per month, which is actually huge if you think about how much 1.5 pounds of meat looks like. That is a ton of muscle that you'd be adding. Even an intermediate lifter could be putting on half to 1% of body weight per month. So, if you weigh 100 pounds, or not 100 pounds, sorry, 200 pounds, you could probably expect somewhat of like 2 pounds per month of muscle mass. This is just muscle mass. An advanced lifter can expect 0.25 to 0.5% of their body weight per month to increase in muscle mass. So for me, that would be about 0.3 to 0.6 pounds per month, or 0.3 kilos per month of muscle mass that I have the upper potential. This is if everything goes well, if my training is dialed in, if my nutrition is spot on, if I'm I'm not injured, and so on, progressively overloading and challenging myself in the right way. So again, 0.3 pounds of muscle per month, that might not sound like a lot to people, but again, if you picture it as a slab of meat in front of you, that's actually still a good amount. So I personally, even though I can only expect a maximum of 0.6 pounds per month, I'm aiming for about 1 pound of total weight gain per month. So that could be that I'm gaining, or that's very likely that I'm gaining about 0.4 pounds of fat per month as well, which is not the end of the world, especially since I have started this lean gaining phase reasonably lean. So far, 8 weeks in, I'm about 1.8 pounds up. So that is the perfect rate, with trying to be under 2 pounds for the 2 months, actually. And as I mentioned, I'm planning to gain for another 4 months. So all in all, probably gaining about 6 pounds throughout this, potentially more. We will see. I just want to share a few cool wins, I guess, from this, what I really have been enjoying already over the last few weeks. So the first 3 to 4 weeks were actually amazing. I really I really felt a lot of energy for my training. I felt even leaner, felt my glycogen storages filling up. I felt like I actually had more definition. My hunger actually went up. So that's a pretty good sign for metabolism. It just means my metabolism was ramped up. I probably did more involuntary movement as well, fidgeting more, and so on. I was kind of expecting to be sleeping better. Sleep is always slightly a bit of an issue for me, or has been a struggle for me. It hasn't had any effect on sleep for me yet. could also be because of this apartment, but generally speaking, this hasn't changed. I'm also curious to see how it's going to impact my cycle long term. I am still having irregular cycles in the sense of strength and duration, etc. So I'm hoping that this will actually also help my hormones balance out even more by now. So probably from the second month onward, I have felt very satiated. Sometimes I even need to, like, not necessarily force myself to eat, but be like, oh, I'm actually not hungry, but oh well, then let's eat, sort of thing. I can definitely tell a very big difference between my hunger cues before and after ovulation. That is always the case for me though. Like the week before ovulation, I could just pretty much eat anything in sight, and the week after, I'm like, oh no, I'm not actually that hungry. And around ovulation, I also feel super fluffy. So both times throughout this lean gaining phase that I have ovulated, I felt fluffy, and I was like, oh no, I don't actually want to eat more, or I don't feel so comfortable. But I'm trying to always around that time need to get out of my head and just acknowledging that no matter how much I would cut my calories or whatever I would do, I would still feel fluffy. It's just part of it. I have been wearing slightly less tight clothes. I'm still rocking my sports bra and shorts while I train, but I am aware of the fact that maybe over the next few months I might want to put on a shirt just if I get more self-conscious around it. And that's okay. It's actually very helpful for my self-esteem that it's not super super warm here at the moment in Colombia, so I am actually wearing leggings and hoodies and so on too. So that's why I often encourage people to think in terms of the year or the months when it comes to their nutritional periodization, because for me, I mean, I wouldn't want to lean gain when I have to be or I want to be in a bikini every single day. At the same time, you don't necessarily need to look your absolute leanest when it's like the middle of winter and no one can appreciate it anyway. But thankfully, so far, I haven't been tempted to go into a cut or anything like that. I'm determined not to do any mini cuts throughout this lean gaining phase. Not to say that there is not merit to them at times. Usually, when people do go into a gaining phase and they notice that they have put on a little bit more body fat than they would have liked to, or they have some sort of social event coming up, then sometimes they want to do like a week or two of a mini cut. Sometimes it turns into an extended mini cut of like a month, sometimes just a few days. But what we have to acknowledge too, every time we pull our body back out of that surplus, we're hindering our progress throughout that time and might actually lose some muscle mass again. So anyway, I am committed to it. I keep saying it. But let's get more into the specific strategies. So firstly, as mentioned, I want to start with the minimal effective dose, and that's what I try to do with any clients that we're taking through a lean gaining phase as well. So for me, that meant a start of a 10% increase of my baseline calories, which I thought were my maintenance calories. But I bumped them up another 5% about 2 weeks in, because I think the initial increase, or maybe a 5% increase, was only up to my maintenance, or maybe the upper side of maintenance, and now I'm definitely in a surplus. So I'm up 15% from baseline, which is super normal. Anywhere between 5 and 10 and 20% increase is considered reasonably normal, depending on how aggressive you want to go, depending on how long you want to go. We generally recommend doing lean gaining or any kind of gaining phase for at least 3 months. There's really no point per se to do any less than that, because of course, if you want to go into a cut afterwards, or generally speaking, you might lose a little bit of the muscle mass again. And so the last thing you want to do is like gain and then cut again and then end up exactly where you were, or potentially even at a higher body fat percentage. That just doesn't make any sense. So finding the minimal effective dose, being patient, and then there are additional things that I think are very beneficial when it comes to fat gain minimal. We're keeping fat gain minimal. So centering your additional calories mostly around your workouts, or a little bit in the evening as well. So for example, for me, that meant I have added a pre-workout meal. I work out in the morning. I have been working out fasted for the last few years because I have a reasonably large dinner and I work out at 6 a.m. So it's almost hard to get anything down before that. Nonetheless, I have included something easily digestible and it's actually going quite well. And I have bumped up the carbs in my post-workout meal also. I will give you some examples of my meals later on. But yes, the biggest increase, or I've almost only increased carbs. I have kept my protein the same. I have kept my fats the same as well. I was just trying to think, but yes. And the third recommendation I would give, in addition to finding the minimal effective dose and centering the extra calories around workouts, would be to keep food quality high. We are often super tempted to start getting too flexible in a surplus, and that is exactly when people put on more body fat. They slack off on the tracking, they eat out even more, and that's all fine, but especially if you're anticipating a little bit of extra fat gain, but if it's very important for you to stay reasonably lean, then I would still recommend having high quality foods. That doesn't mean it needs to be all really hard to digest. As a high quality food, I would still count rice. I would also count some breads. I would count fruit. I would count high quality fats and so on. I'm basically just saying, just because you have the extra calories available now, don't go and eat pizza every single day and then be surprised that you're extra bloated from the cheese or from the gluten or just the processing and the higher sodium and so on. So keeping food quality high. And that brings me to my fourth point as well, which is continuing to track rather accurately. I think, as I said, one of the beauties of a maintenance phase is that you can be a little bit more loose with this, and you can actually be a bit looser with this in a gaining phase too, but then again, anticipate higher fat gain. So try to weigh out as much as you can, especially if you are not an experienced estimator. And do still keep your meals out or meals someone else prepares for you to a I don't want to say minimum, but in range. Keep it in range. I believe that there's just too much room for error, and if you're eating out, then always try to err on the side of caution. I'm not trying to be overly fear-mongering here. I'm just saying if remaining lean throughout the lean gaining phase is important to you, I believe that is what's required, or I have just seen too many people get too flexible and then feeling fluffy way too much and then wanting to pull out of the gaining phase, which is just a pity because it's really not the fault of the gaining phase and much more the fault of too much flexibility here. Then lastly, or actually it's not my last point, the fifth point is I'm still paying attention to needs, and naturally, because I have more energy intake, I feel like I have more energy outside of my training available as well. However, I'm actually trying to keep that somewhat the same, so I don't really want it to go up much more, and I also don't necessarily want to decrease it. If you're someone who has been doing cardio previously, I would probably take that out and just focus on steps for now. Remember, your main goal right now is to build muscle. So anything that's not really contributing to that, such as endurance training, is just taken away from extra time that you could be spending on resting and building muscle or training and building muscle essentially. So for me, my needs is generally, or my steps are generally around 8 to 10,000 per day. And apart from that, I'm still trying to stand when I work at my desk and so on. So that doesn't mean you have to cut down all your non-exercise activity, but just be mindful that you're not ramping it up too much or dropping it entirely. But yes, so apart from that, the sixth point that I have mentioned or touched on before as well was make sure you get out of your head, as I am, especially around my ovulation times, but also other times when I see, people posting pictures where they're extra shredded, and I'm thinking, oh, and I'm doing the opposite. I'm going the opposite way. But oftentimes it helps to have a coach here, most of the time actually, or other forms of accountability. So I will admit I don't actually have a coach helping me with this. I actually really wanted to take myself through that. Nonetheless, it was very important to me to talk about this with my other coaches, with Laura and Tammy, and to talk to you guys about it as well, and have social media as my accountability. Because if I would have just kept it to myself, it would have been very easy to quit after like 2 months if I would have felt, oh, I'm not seeing any results, or I'm actually feeling like I'm just gaining fat and no muscle, and so on. So get out of your head by getting some accountability and input from other people. Try to look at any kind of data as simply data. So even if you take body scans and you see the fat percentage go up, know that that's normal. Even if you feel like your clothes are not fitting anymore, remember you're trying to put on muscle, so therefore the muscle mass has to go somewhere. Therefore, it's very likely your clothes might not fit so well anymore. But yes, the last thing now that I did want to say in terms of my tips was a new training program, or just a training program that really motivates you and that is exactly aligned with your goals, can be incredibly helpful. And here I am actually following someone else's training program, Jeff Nippard's training program. It's a women's specialization program. Shout out to him. A really great program, 5-day program actually. And it's not that we don't also have amazing training programs in our training app. It is that I didn't want to program for myself, because I know that I would be avoiding certain things. And even though I'm really good at programming for other people, if I know it's been my own program, then I would make too many tweaks to it. So this is a program, that the first program in a really long amount of time, that I'm actually following super, super strictly as long as my body permits. The reason I haven't been following someone else's program in the last few years is because of all the niggly injuries and things I had going on. But now, as my body finally feels like it's pretty much fully recovered, I can push myself again, especially when it comes to squat movements, even with pull-ups and so on. I had a bit of an issue with my bicep tendon and my hip. So anyway, I'm super pumped about this program, and it's actually a lot of fun trying to progressively overload. And I've already had a deload week as well. For me, the thing that's a little bit hard to balance personally right now, as many of you know, I don't have a family, or I have so many liberties in terms of what time I work and how, so that's really a positive. But I love exploring and I love traveling, and I often go for weekend trips, and so that is a bit more challenging sometimes. So I just need to be more prepared when it comes to the foods there, looking up restaurants ahead of time. And I do want to try new meals here in Colombia, and generally speaking, I probably eat out 2-3 times per week. But most of the time, I really try to look ahead, plan ahead, and making sure that I am getting all my food in, but also not too much flexibility. I've already noticed that trying to play catch up when it comes to food doesn't work. So if, for instance, I'm out and I didn't take anything with me, then oftentimes I rather not eat anything, or just have very, very little of the crappy food that's around, and saving my hunger and appetite for the healthy food that I have prepared at home already. But if I come home at like 8 or 9 o'clock and then trying to still catch up on over 1,000 calories, it just doesn't do so well for my sleep. So yes, planning and preparation, that's probably the other thing, is still really, really important in a lean gaining phase, as well as the tracking that I was saying. So the 7 points that I essentially mentioned was finding the minimal effective dose, but still allow yourself to really go into a surplus. Remember, you do want to and need to put on some muscle mass, therefore a little bit of weight as well. Second point was centering the additional calories around your workout. Most likely it's going to be beneficial if it comes mostly from carbs. If you're someone who also has some additional hormonal issues, you could distribute more of those calories to your fats as well. My fats are already at a pretty decent level at 75 grams, so I really didn't think that I needed to bump those up even more. Third point was still to keep food quality really high. That doesn't mean it should all be from vegetables. On the contrary, especially if as your carbs go up, you need some easily digestible, easily absorbable foods in there as well, such as rice and fruit and so on. I'm still continuing to track rather accurately, measuring and weighing as much as I can, and I'm still trying to be as prepared and planned out as possible. I'm keeping my non-exercise activity activity the same. Definitely not bumping it up, as my main goal is muscle growth, and I am making sure I'm getting out of my head, looking at data as simply as data, and not getting super attached or freaking out about the scale or anything like that. I'm having some accountability through the other coaches, through you guys, and I'm super pumped about a new training program. I didn't really change anything about my supplements, or didn't change anything at all, really. I'm always taking creatine, omega-3, magnesium. I'm also actually taking calcium because my calcium intake was usually pretty low, even though I do eat some dairy, as you will see in an example shortly. And I usually take vitamin D if I'm not somewhere where I'm exposed to sunlight, often like last year in Mexico, for instance. I also take ashwagandha for stress management and maca to help me out, help me balance my hormones. Occasionally, I take vitamin B, iron, and zinc if I don't eat red meat regularly. And I don't take any pre-workouts. I'm like, when I wake up in the morning, my cortisol's high. I don't even need any coffee. I am ready to go. What I do have throughout the day is an electrolyte drink, just also because it tastes yummy. And I do feel like it's kind of beneficial with the extra sodium in there and so on. So typical day for me might look like my pre-workout low-fat yogurt with a banana, and then I either have oats or cream of rice with protein powder and some berries. I usually have a small piece of dark chocolate with my morning coffee after that, and then lunch. Right now, since it's not such a warm spot, I actually don't really feel like salads at the moment. I usually have had, or historically have had, like salads and salmon, or even liver for lunch, and in spots where it's hotter or if it's summer. But right now I'm kind of craving more eggs and potatoes, and usually have some cruciferous vegetables or cabbage with my lunch as well. Nonetheless, lunch, even though it does include the potatoes, is still kind of moderate carbs or lower carb meal, just because it helps me with steady energy levels in the afternoon. In the afternoon, I do have a snack, which could be more yogurt or low-fat cottage cheese and maybe some carrot sticks. And I also have another coffee and a little piece of chocolate. And then dinner, really, it depends. Sometimes it's a meal out, sometimes it's fish, sometimes it's I do like organ meat, so I eat liver, or I eat heart as well, chicken heart. And then with that, I have a good amount of carbs again, so rice or a wrap or something like that, with some more easily digestible meat, vegetables such as spinach, peppers. And then I actually also have another snack after that, which is right now is more casein powder with oats, or sometimes it might just be oats, or sometimes it might just be nuts. It really depends what macros I kind of have left over. So yes, those would be this would be a sample day for my lean gaining phase. I hope you found my tips helpful. Maybe this is motivating you also to focus on muscle growth for a while. Again, like I said, even a lot of women benefit from going through a decent lean gaining phase, not just a month or two where they think they're putting on some muscle, but actually committing some time to it, long-term growth. And I 100% understand that people don't want to put on a lot, or definitely just want a minimal fat gain throughout this entire time. I'm 100% in the same boat. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, or you are interested in lean gaining or a little bit of extra accountability, don't hesitate to reach out. Please also give me your feedback in regards to this podcast. I'd love for you to subscribe, to comment with future topic recommendations or wishes. And aside from that, I thank you for your time, for listening in. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode on social. Very much appreciated. You can also follow us on Instagram at Nutrition Coaching and Life, or head to our website, www.nutritioncoachingandlife.com, where we provide more valuable content. Have a wonderful day. Now go out and work on your best self.